What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Big Five Pod, episode number 133, and the final preview of Preview Week. I'm, of course, your co-host, Kyle Morello, co-host Jake Copestick, and essentially our third co-host when we have him on, especially with spaces and everything. You guys know who this is, but I'm going to introduce him anyway. Aaron Bracy of Big5Hoops.com, Bracy Sports Media, author of A Soaring Season and another book on the way, which I'll let him tell you about later. Aaron, it's so good to see you. It's so good to see you on video, as we were talking about before this, and not just on Spaces. Great to talk to you. How are you?
I'm doing great, guys. Season's right around the corner. It's great to see you, Kyle. Great to see you, Cope. And normally when we do these, if we're on Spaces, I have like a backwards hat, a T-shirt on. So I actually had to look somewhat presentable, get my setup. I'm usually just no one cares what my background is. So this is a little different, but going to be more excited to talk to you guys tonight.
And the sentiment is the same for both of us. I can tell you that much. So we're excited for this, especially because we've been doing all these, team previews and conference previews, and we deep dive into, like I said, all the teams and conferences. But now we just get to talk about the Big Five, what happens in the Big Five, Classic, Pod Play, everything like that. So we're super excited. So guys, let's kick this off here. I'm going to read off the schedule a little bit, and then we can talk about kind of, our expectations for pod play before the Big Five Classic. So to start off on Saturday, November 8th, just, a week or so away from this recording, Drexel at St. Joe's. On Tuesday, November 11th, LaSalle at Temple. Monday, November 17th, St. Joe's at Penn. Friday, November 21st, Penn at Drexel. And Monday, December 1st, rounding out pod play, Temple at Villanova. Of course, the pods are a little bit different this year. You have LaSalle, Villanova, Temple for pod 2. And for pod 1, you have Drexel, St. Joe's, and Penn. So a little different than the first couple of years of this format. And then, of course, these pod plays will decide who gets to go to the Big Five Championship, third place game, and fifth place game. Aaron, seeing those 6 games, I'm sure, is obviously getting you excited. It's getting us excited as well. But which ones are you looking at the most to start us off?
Well, first of all, I just want to say, I think the Big Five Pod and the Big Five Classic, I think in some ways has saved the Big Five, because the Big Five was kind of sort of becoming an afterthought. And I think this format has just revitalized the Big Five. I just love it. It gives us something to talk about, the Big Five Classic. And quite frankly, I think, with St. Joe's winning the first 2 editions of this Big Five Classic, Big Five new format, I think, Villanova has something to really play for this year. Not that they didn't in the past, but I think it's going to be a very motivated Villanova team. The game that I'm looking forward to the most is the game that I think potentially could happen in the final, and that's St. Joe's Villanova, which may not happen. But that would be something to have a holy war for a Big Five title played on the court. But in the pod play, interestingly enough, the game that I'm really looking forward to the most is Villanova at LaSalle, partly because I'm just so curious about LaSalle and so curious about Darius Nichols. And this is a early season game with a Villanova team that's going to be a little banged up. A new Villanova team. And I think that could be a very interesting game. And I think that could be a potential upset early in the season. And so I'm just looking forward to being at Glazer. And I'm looking forward to all the games. But for some reason, that's the one that really, when I looked at the schedule, that's the one that really jumps out to me as the most intriguing.
So, as much as I would like to agree with you, and that's on my list as well, because you're going to have Villanova going to Glazer. I mean, the situation ripe for an upset to have probably a sold-out Glazer, a bunch of very loud, maybe slightly intoxicated students in the crowd to make it an even harder atmosphere. One that will maybe mirror that St. Joe's LaSalle one that you saw the very last game at Glazer and Fran Dunphy's last game. But for me, going to be St. Joe's going to the Palestra to play Penn, because you're going to have 2 new head coaches. You're going to have Steve Donahue going back to the Palestra, where, shockingly enough, it turns out he's now the head coach of another Big Five program, and Fran McCaffrey on the other sideline now at Penn. And if we think back to that game last year, where there's a lot of the same faces on this Penn team, St. Joe's put it to Steve Donahue's Penn Quakers pretty good last year. So those guys on Penn are going to be thinking about that game at the Palestra again. And Steve Donahue's going to be bringing in a very long, big, and athletic St. Joe's team there that we could see maybe the same result again. So that's the one I'm most intrigued. You have Steve Donahue this time coming out of the visitors' locker room, has to stay in that very, very tiny visitors' locker room that still has carpet, only has 1 or 2 bathroom stalls in there and a couple showers and a whiteboard. There's no lockers as opposed to the nice home locker room that he has there. But that's the one that I have. You have Steve Donahue going against the guy that ultimately ended up taking his job after he was dismissed from Penn. So hopefully there's a nice crowd at the Palestra for that one. But as much as I like the Villanova-LaSalle game, I didn't have it circled, 3 months ago when Billy Lang was the head coach there. It made me circle it extra when I saw it. And Steve Donahue is now going to be the head coach on the other sideline.
That's right. That's right. And for me, I'm going to go a little bit different one from you guys. I'm going to go Penn at Drexel on Friday, November 21st, Battle of 33rd Street. We were just at Drexel practice this past weekend, and I know that they're fired up for it. I know that Penn's fired up for it. As I joke, the longest road trip in Division I college basketball. But it's cool when those teams get together. They did a couple years ago, or it might have been 3 years ago now at this point. But I think this is their first pod play match. This is their first pod play matchup. They obviously matched up for the first time in Big Five play in the 5th place game last year. So that was fun, but this will be even more fun being at one of the campuses, and the DAC's going to be electric. Probably, if I had to guess, will be their biggest crowd of the year. That's going to be a sight to see, and we'll be there for that. Aaron, I'm sure you'll try to get down there for that as well. I think that's going to be a really good one. And then also, obviously, the reason why we're talking about them, it's going to be a great game on the court too, I think. I think these two teams I think Penn's going to be a lot more improved. I think Drexel is going to prove some people wrong. I think it's going to be a feisty, fun game and a really cool atmosphere. So I'm looking forward to that one the most for sure. All right. I want to move on now to predictions for the matchup in the Big Five Championship. Aaron, I heard yours already, so I want you to expand on it.
I'm not sure if that's my prediction. But
is that not your prediction? Okay, but you said you were looking forward to it, though. So
I said that would be the potential.
If you did. Okay, yeah. So then what would be, do you think, the two winners of these pods facing up against each other at, I want to say the Wells Fargo Center, but it's not that anymore, Xfinity Mobile Arena on December 7th. December 6th.
A couple things. I would like to quickly circle back. Neither of you, which I'm surprised as your alma mater. Cope, I thought you were going Temple at Villanova. And then Kyle, when he did it, I thought you were going to go Temple at Villanova. That's another game that I'm looking forward to. I always love Temple-Villanova matchups. They tend to produce really good games over the years. I've been to a bunch of them. And also, you mentioned the locker room at the – first of all, Cope, any game at the Palestra, you're right. When you started talking about the Palestra, I started thinking I should have rethought mine. Any game at the Palestra, a Big Five game, is always awesome. The locker room you mentioned is locker room number 4. You described it perfectly. It's a carpeted floor, a whiteboard, some hooks, a couple stalls in there, one shower. But outside of that locker room, it's very special because there's a plaque that honors Jack Shore, the all-time leading scorer of the Big Five, my mentor, and all-around great guy. So that made me think of Jack. Just wanted to point that out. I'm really bad at predictions, and I stopped making them. When I first started covering the Big Five, I used to make them. And then I realized that I wasn't really getting them right, and that was before all the gambling. So I didn't want to leave people high and dry. And also, I found myself rooting for the teams that I was picking rather than just enjoying the games. So I'm going to couch what I'm going to say by saying I really don't like making them. But I don't see a way that St. Joe's doesn't come out of the pod with Drexel and Penn. They're just too talented. If the St. Joe's game was at Drexel, because of the respect I have for Zach Spiker and because I know how he develops players, I would give the Dragons more of a chance than them going to Hagen and upsetting St. Joe's. And then St. Joe's at Penn. Cope, I think you called it right. I don't think it's going to be close. I do not see a path where St. Joe's does not come out of its pod. If they do, I think it would be sort of an epic failure on their part. In the other pod, obviously Villanova is going to be the favorite, but I think some of the injuries in the early season, I think it could potentially create some avenues where a Temple could sneak into that final again. LaSalle, as much as I like what Darius Nichols is doing there, I don't think they have the talent at the moment to compete with Villanova or Temple in they played 100 times. I don't think they would, certainly win the majority of those. So I'm going to say Villanova or Temple. Obviously, it should be Villanova, but I think Temple has some really veteran, experienced players on their roster. And I think those guys, some guys who've really been through college basketball, Villanova does too, but they're relying, I think, on Caden Lewis. They're relying on some youth, some guys who haven't been through this. And I think potentially it could be Temple, although the fact that Temple would have to win at Villanova, for me, makes that more challenging. So I guess I'm going to circle back, Kyle, and say it's going to be Villanova and St. Joe's.
All right. Oh,
I am going to agree, and I feel like it's very chalky to say that, but I also feel like it would be a real bummer if we didn't get it. But I also think that these are the two best teams that we have in the city. So I'm going to go with that matchup. It just feels right that we have it, and the Big Five powers that be that made these pods. Let's make no mistake about it. They are rooting for this game to happen as well, because for them to have the Holy War, two good teams that could push for a tournament berth in the two biggest conferences that we have in the Big Five that these respective teams play in, at Xfinity Mobile, where they can sell a lot of tickets, somebody hang a banner, the big rivalry game, the big Holy War game. That's what everybody's rooting for. That's what I think will happen. However, Aaron brings up the preseason injuries that Villanova has. There's a chance that we don't see a Devin Askew or maybe a Zion Stanford for this game as well. They're going to be shorthanded at the guard position for maybe all three of their Big Five games, given that they're so early in the season, really in that first month and change. So I'll take a Holy War championship game, and I'm going to take St. Joe's to pull it out. And for the third straight year, they will still be the only team that will have hung a banner at the at Xfinity Mobile Arena in the new Big Five format.
Yeah, that's good. That's going to take some time for me to get used to. Also, like I was saying, listen, guys, I really, really, really want to be contrarian because I just don't like picking what everyone else picks. But I don't see a scenario, or I don't see many scenarios at least, where Villanova and St. Joe's aren't meeting and I almost said it too, Copos Fargo, but Xfinity Mobile Arena for the championship. I think the only way, and Aaron, you mentioned it, is if LaSalle at home pulls off the upset. But even then, Temple's going to have to go to Villanova, and I don't know if they win that. And then does LaSalle beat Temple at Temple? Certainly can. Almost did a couple years ago when they went there and they had that 3 overtime game. I don't know. And even then, I think it's the tiebreakers by net ranking, I'm pretty sure. So Villanova would get that. And then in the other pod, I think, as you both said, St. Joe's is just going to out-talent both of those teams. The one road game for St. Joe's being at the Palestra. I don't want to disparage anything for Penn and the fan base, but it's not so much a home court advantage as it used to be. And that's just reality right now. Hopefully that changes. Hopefully in the Fran McCaffrey era that changes and it can get back to what it once was there. I definitely want to see those corners full for something other than just the Catholic League semifinal and championship. But as of right now, I don't know if that's going to happen. So I think it's going to be St. Joe's and Villanova. And Cope, I agree. I'm going to pick St. Joe's to beat Nova at Xfinity Mobile and hang their third straight banner, although it would be interesting and cool to see somebody else raise one as well. Now there have been 2 contenders to challenge St. Joe's and Temple and LaSalle to start this new Big Five era. Would love for one of those or another team to try as well and maybe knock off St. Joe's. But for right now, it's St. Joe's City, and that's what it's going to be until December. I did get it right. December 6th at Xfinity Mobile Arena. Actually, I'm looking at one of the school's websites right now. I'm not going to out them and say which one, but they have it as Wells Fargo Center on their website at the bottom there. So funny enough for that. All right. We're going to move on from the Big Five Classic and Big Five play. We're going to zoom out a little bit for the entire season. Obviously, we're not going to go over every single team. If you want to go on our and preview every single team, go look at the last 5 episodes Cope and I have done for in-depth analysis of each team. But in a broad view, Aaron, I'll start with you. Which team are you looking forward to most to watching? I know these are almost like your children in a way. You're looking forward to seeing them all play, but which team are you really looking at this year and being like, I'm really, really intrigued by how their season may go?
First of all, I just want to commend you guys on what you guys have done with your preview pods. They've been tremendous. And anyone who has any little inkling interest at all in Big Five basketball, any of the schools, if you have not checked out their previews of the schools, you definitely should listen to them. Just phenomenal work by you guys. The detail and the depth and the knowledge, really, really impressive. As far as the teams that I'm looking forward to watching, like this is actually going to be maybe reverse of what you might think, because the teams that intrigue me the most this year, number one is LaSalle. I'm just so curious about Darius Nichols, and his style is so unique. The emphasis on offensive rebounding, the emphasis on getting the free throw line. They went to the free throw line 40 times. Now, I know they were playing Ursinus, so it's a Division III team, but it doesn't even matter who they play. They could be playing a sixth grade team, whatever. Just the emphasis on getting the free throw 40 times. Like, I don't remember a college basketball team going to the free throw line 40 times. It's 40 times. And scored 30 points. So they're shooting 75% from the line, which is awesome. By the way, I think they were like 3 of 24 from three. So, they're going to need to work on that a little bit. But I'm very intrigued. Playing like 10, 11 players, how it's going to work. Their enthusiasm has been off the charts. I just love the energy that he's brought and that the staff has brought to the school. I think it's really taken things up a notch for LaSalle. And I am really just curious to see how it plays out on paper. So on the court, number one for me is LaSalle, just out of curiosity. And number two is Penn. Like, I am really intrigued to see what Fran McCaffrey, with his Big Ten, Power 5, Power 4 conference experience, an alum of Penn, loves the Palestra, loves the Quakers, no interest in going anywhere else at this point in his career. What he can do for the Quakers. And speaking of unique styles, I mean, he's going to play at a tempo and a pace that is probably going to be different than anyone's seen in the Big Five. And I know teams are playing faster nowadays, but I think, and you guys could back me up on this, I think he's going to play faster even and get up more shots than even Billy Lang tried to do at St. Joe's. And that was a breakneck pace at times. So I think he can really have success there. With his reputation, with his pedigree. And honestly, guys, like with Ethan Roberts, I think they have one of the best players in the Ivy League. And with TJ Power, if healthy, they have another top Ivy League player. Like, I would not be shocked if they got into Ivy Madness this year. I know they were picked 8th of 8 in the Ivy League, but I'm really curious. So, obviously, Villanova and Kevin Willard, interest, Steve Donahue, St. Joe's. I always like what Zach Spiker does at Drexel. I'm really curious about Darian Ford and Temple and some other guys over there. But those would be the two that I'm kind of most intrigued by, be LaSalle and Penn.
Well, I do agree with you because, well, first of all, there's 4 new coaches in the Big Five, so there's a lot of intrigue here. But the team that I'm most intrigued to see play, at least to start the year, is Temple. This is a big year for Adam Fisher going into year number 3. 17 of 15 last year after a 16 and 20 campaign the year before. 9 and 9 in the American. And we previewed the American yesterday with our guy, Luke Taylor from Full Court Network. And what I said to him was last year's team, it felt like I was at the table with all the ingredients to bake the cake, and they never got put in the bowl, mixed together, and put in the oven. There was the situation with Lynn Greer. There was injuries to Jamal Mashburn. The Jameel Brown experiment did not work. There was injuries to Aquante Berry. Like, I never got to see the full product. I never got to see the full team, and it's a shame because I think that they're certainly better than that team last year when healthy, with the amount of games that Jamal Mashburn missed, that team last year was certainly better than a 500 finish in conference. I thought they could be a top 5 team in the conference, and it just didn't happen that way with all the injuries and off the court stuff with Lynn Greer, who I thought was going to be a really good complement with the guards they had. So this is a big year for Adam Fisher because this is a place with a lot of history, and the last handful of years, I mean, they haven't got a sniff of the tournament. I know they made the conference championship game, but prior to that, a 5-13 conference play finish, and at one point a 10-game losing streak. Just wasn't good. So this is a big year for him in year 3. And there's just so much new. He only brings back 2 regular contributors and his 2 freshmen, and Aiden Tobias and Babatunde Dorodola, who are going to be massive, knowing what he wants, his play style. And the 2 of them, if they can take freshmen to sophomore leaps, they're going to be a big reason why if this team is successful, why they are successful is those 2. But there's just so many newcomers. Not sure how the pieces are going to fit. Not sure what a definitive starting lineup is going to look like, how long that's going to take to figure out, if there's going to be shuffling. So there's just so much newness. And even with the returners, those are still young guys going into their second year that you would think can make a sophomore leap, but it remains to be seen. Not that they can't get there, not that it can't happen. There's just so much newness. I'm not really sure what this team is going to look like. I really want to see this team play some games. So very, very much intrigued by Temple this year. Just with the amount of newcomers, I want to see how it all meshes together.
Yeah, and I'm going to combine both of yours. I think Temple and LaSalle are the 2 most intriguing. I know that's a cop-out answer, but just thinking about it now, and Cope, you mentioned a little bit, but combined between the 2 of them, they are returning exactly 3 players from the year before. You mentioned Babatunde Dorodola, Cope, and Aiden Tobiasen, and then LaSalle's bringing back Eric Acker, and that's it. Obviously a new regime there as well, but there's so much turnover, and there's turnover with every team. I mean, like we said earlier, Cope, like St. Joe's lost their 3 best scorers from a year ago. Penn has some new guys, and they're the most obviously continuity of any team, and they probably will be just because of the Ivy League and the nature that is. Villanova, a new coach and a bunch of new players as well. So all these teams are bringing in new guys, but those 2 in particular, I mean, it's just the makeup of them. You don't know what it's going to look like, especially with LaSalle and Aaron, as you mentioned, with the new style, playing 11 deep, offensive rebounding. They're going to push the pace a little bit and kind of just make a muck of it. I think that's how they're going to try to win some games, because they might not have the top end talent of a Dayton or a VCU or a St. Louis in that league. So they're going to have to find other ways to win games. I kind of compare to how I play college football 26 on the PS5. I'm not good. I've never been good at Madden or any football video games. So how do I compete and try to win? I'm going to run the football and try to run the clock out and see if I can stay close with teams. That's how I try to win games. And I think that's like kind of similar. It's a funny comparison, but that's how LaSalle is going to try to do that with offensive rebounding, retaining possessions, and playing with depth so they can tire guys out and do that. I think that's a good strategy for them, especially as in year 1 under Darius Nichols, they're going to try to bring in more talent eventually. They have some guys in this team who I think are going to be solid A-10 players, but that's just how they're going to have to win games. And then with Temple, Cope, as you mentioned too, like they just have so many new guys. The pieces might fit, honestly, a little better this year than they did last year, just because they're not going to rely on the productivity of Jamal Mashburn Jr. And some of those other guys. And I know they had injuries and suspensions and whatnot, like you said, but I think there's a few guys there, like a CJ Hines, who will be able to help lift that load. And I think it's not going to rely on one person. So excited to see how that plays out, but it's intriguing because it's unknown. I don't know what that's going to look like right now. So intriguing though, nonetheless. Aaron, I want to go back to you though. Which team in the Big Five, and we're talking about finishing position here within their conference, which team in the Big Five do you think will do the best within their conference? I know you mentioned Penn, wouldn't be surprising if they get an Ivy Madness. Villanova obviously always has upside in the Big East, even though it's a loaded top of the conference there as well, and we've mentioned some other as well. But where do you think, what Big Five team do you think will finish the best in their conference?
Yeah, I think there are 2 teams that you look at. Well, I'm looking at as potentially getting to the top part of their conference and being able to push for an NCAA bid. And again, number 1 is going to be surprising because they're picked 8 of 8, but it's Penn. And I think with Fran McCaffrey and with some of the talent that he has back, some of the talent that he has coming in, the style that he plays, and honestly, an Ivy League that is very top heavy, I think they could sneak into Ivy Madness, as I mentioned, as a top 4 team. And then once you get into that setting, anything can happen. So my number one pick to potentially break this 3-year streak of the NCAA drought is going to be Penn. And my number 2 pick, which honestly is probably, I have one being Penn, and then I have 2 kind of farther down, even really not that big of a threat, is St. Joe's. They were picked 7th in the A10. They have the reigning A10 Rookie of the Year in Deuce Jones. They have a potential A10 first or second team player in Jaden Glover. And they have a lot of experience with Derek Simpson, Anthony Finkley, Justin Ajibar. I think this is a St. Joe's team that could sneak into, they've been in the A10 semi the last 2 seasons. I don't see why they couldn't get back to the A10 semis this year. And if they get to the semis, anything can happen. I don't see, as much as I think LaSalle is going to outperform expectations, pick 13 of 14, I don't see them finishing in the top half of the A10. Drexel, I think, will outperform. What were they picked, 9th or 10th in the CAA? I don't think they're going to finish that low, but I don't think they're capable. Well, I shouldn't say capable. They are capable, but I think the top half of the conference, the Towsonds, I think are going to be too strong. Temple, I don't know that there's enough there for them to beat a Memphis and to get into the NCAA tournament. I do think they have a better schedule than some of the other Big Five teams in a non-conference. So if they were somehow able to really get hot early in the season, they'd have to get really hot and win pretty much most of those tougher games, well, all their games. They could potentially go into the American with an outside chance of that large. And I just think Villanova is just, I think this is sort of a rebuilding year. I don't think there's enough there. They're picked 7th. They could bump up a spot or 2, but I just don't think that this year is going to be the year they get into the NCAA tournament. And I think part of it is their schedule is just brutal. And they're banged up a little here in the early season. So long-winded, but Penn is the team that I think has the best chance. And then farther down on second best for me is St. Joe's. Having said that, guys, I don't think these are great chances to end this 3-year NCAA drought, sadly. But if I had to go with one, I'm going to go with the team that's picked 8th and 8th in their league, which kind of, I guess, sounds weird, but that's what I'm thinking at the moment.
So I'm going to agree with you on Penn, and then Villanova is going to be my next team that can break this drought. When we preview the Ivy League, also the pleasure of previewing the Ivy League for Stephen Bagel and the Center Hubs college basketball preview. Yes, it's top heavy, and that's because you have a very, very, very good team in Yale who is going to be a terrifying draw if somebody gets them. And look, anything can happen. Let's not forget 2 years ago, Yale upsets Auburn, and how'd they get there? Well, they had to beat Brown literally at the buzzer to get there. So it's tough in these one-bid leagues because anything can happen. But Yale is tremendous. Yale is going to be the cream of the crop here. And then you have Cornell and Harvard behind him. And Tommy Amaker's had the talent at Harvard before and has fallen short and not made Ivy Madness in years past. So I really see after really the top 2, I think Harvard is that good. They solidified that 3rd spot, but we've seen that not happen with Tommy Amaker. That 4th spot is open. Columbia's got a new coach in Kevin Hovde, who's actually from Newtown Square and played for Chris Mooney at Richmond. Columbia is a team that can get there. Dartmouth made their first ever Ivy Madness appearance last year. Princeton is in the midst of a total reset and rebuilding stage with no players remaining from that Sweet 16 3 years ago. So that spot is wide open as far as I'm concerned. And even Brown, Brown dealt with injuries last year and is missing their best player, but I do think that if the ceiling is hit and their guards play well enough, they can be a factor. So the Ivy League's wide open. I think Penn has the talent. I think a couple things here. Number one, I guess the good thing is they bring a lot back. I guess also the bad thing is, Aaron, they bring back a lot of people from a team that was not very good last year and finished 7th place in the Ivy League and had quite a few games they were getting beat by a lot of points. And will those guys coming back, do they fit Fran McCaffrey's up-tempo style? Are they going to fit that and being able to play fast? Because these were guys that were recruited to play a more methodical way with Steve Donahue. So questions remain about Penn. The talent, though, I think is certainly there. And A.J. Levine, some young centers they have, if those guys can be good around what they have 2 through 4, this Penn team can make Ivy madness and give themselves a chance, because then all you got to win is 2 games. And, not pull what Temple did a couple years ago. You have to win 5 games in 5 days, which is just a gargantuan task to ask of a team. But I'll get into Villanova now. The problem is they're not going to have the healthy guards, as we talked about to start the year. And man, Aaron, they're going to be challenged right away. And Villanova is the one team where obviously them being Villanova playing in the Big East, they're going to play the hardest non-conference schedule. We are going to find out a lot about them right away. Having to play against the presumptive number 1 pick in AJ DeBansa in the first game in Vegas. Then having to go to Michigan, who's a preseason top 10. Then having to go to Wisconsin in a true road game at Fiserv Forum. Or, a neutral site game, but in their home state. Against Wisconsin, who's preseason top 25. They're going to get Pittsburgh at home, who missed the tournament last year, and in a big year for Jeff Capel is going to be pushing for that this year. We're going to find out a lot about them early. But when they're healthy, Kevin Willard is a coaching upgrade over Kyle Neptune. I believe he'll stabilize things and raise the floor for this team. And if a Caden Lewis is everything he's cracked up to be, which I think he will, a little more on that a little later, if Malachi Palmer can be a breakout player, if the youngster Chris Jeffrey can step in and play a role right away, especially on the defensive end, and Bryce Lindsey can show flashes of the score that he was last year at James Madison, I think Tyler Perkins fits everywhere. I think every team can use a Tyler Perkins, a guy that even if he's not scoring can still affect the game with rebounding, defense, and hustle plays. And I think Matt Hodges is a guy you got to keep an eye on. Not playing last year due to a bogus NCAA denial of a waiver. Not really sure why the NCAA wasted their time on that, trying to keep him out last year. But I think he's a guy that he was recruited hard by Kevin Willard. Kevin Willard wanted him at Maryland. He's still in a spot where he's wanted, and I think that he can thrive. So I see a lot of things that could go right for Villanova. And again, just a coaching upgrade and a stable presence there. That's going to stabilize the program over a number of years. But year one, just like Villanova did last year and just like they did the year before, I know they didn't make the tournament those years. I still firmly believe this team will be playing for their tournament lives mid-late February and into early March. If there's a team that's going to break the streak, I think it's going to be Villanova this year with an at-large bid. As much as I like Penn, I think Villanova is the team that could do it. It's going to be tough, but they have those key non-conference opportunities. They score one. They're not like you're not going to lose anything losing to BYU, losing at Michigan. No one's faulting you for that. If you can pick one of those off, though, you have some serious momentum for yourself going into Big East play and potentially being that team that breaks a 3-year drought in the Big Five.
And Cope, that was exactly mine. I'm going to go with Villanova for this exercise as well. And for the purpose of this, I'll just, I don't need to explain so much more than what you already did, and you did a fantastic job with that. But only for the fact that I don't think there's a lot of separation in the middle of the pack in the Big East, where I think they can finish if, things break right, of course. I think they can finish in a top 3 or 4 potentially. Connecticut's going to be the number 1 team in the conference. They are so good, and Dan Hurley did a great job reloading, bringing guys back. Obviously, Alex Caravan being, the best player of that, potentially the Big East Player of the Year when it all is said and done. Speaking of potential Big East Player of the Year, Zuby Ejiofor coming back to St. John's. I think they're also going to be one of the classes of the league. Them two, Connecticut and St. John's battling out twice this year is going to be a sight to see, potentially 3 times, obviously, once you get to the Big East tournament at the Garden. But that's, and we said it with Tommy Godin when we had him on, but that's just going to be, it's going to be epic. I'm really, really looking forward to that. But outside of that, I do think Creighton will finish 3rd. Behind Creighton, though, like you're looking at Marquette, Providence, Xavier. Is Villanova worse than all those teams? I don't think so. And even with the injuries early on, maybe they'll not be as good in non-conference play when their schedule is also still a little bit tough. It's not going to get so much easier in Big East play. Obviously, it's a great conference, but I can see them getting healthy. I can see them getting more acclimated to the Kevin Willard system. They have talent. It might not be the most talented teams that we've seen in Villanova uniforms, especially in the Jay Wright era, of course, but there's talent on this team. You mentioned Caden Lewis, who top 50 recruit. And yes, Cope, we will talk on him later, I'm sure. But I think there's a really, really realistic chance where this team finishes fourth and it has a real chance of making it to March. And if they do end up fourth in the Big East, I think they are in the driver's seat and getting an at-large bid when it's all said and done. I don't see a scenario where they finish that high and don't play themselves into March without needing an automatic qualifier. So I'm going to go with Villanova, and I do think they will break the streak. Of course, that's also me being a little bit optimistic. I can't be unrealistic and say that it's mostly objective. There's a little bit of hoping and wanting that is going to happen. But I do think that this team has the chance to do that. I'm not sold on Marquette. I'm not sold on Providence this year. I know Marquette really hasn't brought in transfers in the last 3 or 4 years, which doesn't really play in this day and age. Providence, with Kim English, still has some things to prove there. I think Villanova has a chance to be fourth team in this conference and get an at-large bid come March. I definitely think they're, of the Big Five teams, they have the best chance to get to the tournament this year. All right, one final point before we wrap up here that I'm going to ask you guys, and I'm going to give my answer as well. We are going to give, and Aaron, I know you don't love predictions, but we're gonna kind of modify it a little bit. Instead of kind of, we're gonna do Big Five Player of the Year. We're gonna do Big Five Newcomer of the Year, Big Five Coach of the Year, and then not an award that exists, but we're gonna give our Big Five X Factor of the Year, one guy who maybe people not necessarily that aren't so high on, but maybe are underrating a little bit, and who can be a real impact player for their team. So, Aaron, you're our guest. You're gonna go first. Who do you got for those?
Yeah, wow. It's so challenging. And I was telling you guys before we came on, I follow the Big Five closely. I've done a bunch of research and just trying to keep up with all the turnover. And I haven't even thought about a first, second, or third Big Five team. I don't even know. I mean, I could probably come up with one if I needed to. So this question's a little easier. So thank you for it. Okay, I'm going to kind of stick with my line of thinking, my sort of earlier thoughts on who I think has the best chance to play in the tournament or to finish their conference. So for Coach of the Year, if everything goes the way I think it could, and Penn gets into the Ivy Madness, even if they were to just get in the Ivy Madness and not go any further than that, I think Fran McCaffrey would certainly be a leading candidate to be the Coach of the Year. And I'm going to stick with that and say Fran McCaffrey as the preseason Big Five Coach of the Year. Player of the Year, I'm going to stick with a guy who's already had the accolades, and that's Deuce Jones, the reigning A-10 Rookie of the Year. He's going to certainly have every opportunity to continue his success from last year at LaSalle. And I think he has some even better players around him than he did last year. That could work one of two ways. It could limit his production if his shots are reduced, or it could elevate his game. I think he's that good of a player where I think it's going to elevate his game. So I'm going to go with Deuce Jones from St. Joe's as Big Five Player of the Year. And I think Rookie of the Year, I think, is probably as close to a lock as we have in the Big Five, barring injury, and that's Caden Lewis from Villanova. Probably the highest touted, the highest touted prospect in the city, a guy who is going to have the ball in his hands from the opening game with the injury to Devin Askew, and just has looked great so far in the preseason and everything that I've heard about him in practice. I have to say I have not seen him play, so I'm basing this off of what I have read, highlights I've seen. So that's always a little tenuous. But Caden Lewis for Rookie of the Year. X Factor is sort of a tough one. Um, but I'm going to go back to my sort of intrigue, and I'm going to go to LaSalle, and I'm really curious about Rob Dockery. He's coming down from Texas A&M, highly touted player there, did not work out, and I'm always curious to see what guys like that will do. Someone who has a chip on his shoulder wants to show that he is the player that everyone thought he was. So I think he's kind of a true X factor, because I think if he is potentially that player that people thought he was coming out of high school, I think that bodes really well for LaSalle to be a pretty good team, a competitive team, a team that could maybe bump up into the middle of the A10. And if not, then I think LaSalle might be the team that people predicted, 13th out of 14 in the A10. So I think I'm going to go with those and listen to what you guys have to say.
I'm going to start with Coach of the Year because, Aaron, me and you have a couple of the same picks here. But my Coach of the Year is going to be Kevin Willard. And the reason is at the end of the season, again, if this is the team that makes the NCAA tournament and breaks the 3-year drought, I don't see how it can go to anybody else but him. But at the same time, if Penn makes Ivy Madness like you're saying, and they're that bid stealer that maybe knocks off a Yale and makes the NCAA tournament in Fran McCaffrey's first year, then he's going to win it. So I'm going to go with Kevin Willard, though. Kyle brought up a lot of good points. Like when we look at the Big East here, Marquette, again, they don't bring in any transfers. They lose Cam Jones to the NBA. They don't have Stevie Mitchell anymore. Like they lose guys, and it's not bringing guys in, it's bringing guys up. Who do we still have? And last year they make the Sweet 16 a year prior, and then they lose in the first round to New Mexico last year to a very good New Mexico team with Donovan Dent, who will be one of the best players in the country this year. But they took a step back. And it's an interesting case study. And quite frankly, I'm rooting for Marquette because I love what they're doing in this era of college basketball, not just bringing in a zillion transfers and keeping their own guys and trying to run a program like that and keeping their own guys and relying on internal development that a lot of people are not doing, quite frankly. So it's an interesting case study to see what happens with them. I'm rooting for it, but again, like it's an NBA player. That was a borderline Big East Player of the Year in Cam Jones that you're losing. So Marquette could potentially take a step back. This is a massive year for Providence and Kim Inglis bringing in a ton of talent, but last year was a major, major disappointment for Providence. You have Georgetown as well, who loses 2 guys to the NBA, might I add, and Thomas Sorber and an ultra great defender in Micah Peavy. So the at-large bid could be ripe for the picking for Villanova to be a top 5 team in this league, and hence why I think Kevin Willard, in a year where maybe he's not going to be crazy good, like I think he could be in a couple years with all the resources this program has, but stabilizing, showing a good foundation in year one. If they make the tournament, he'll be Coach of the Year. Not too much to expand on for Deuce Jones. We know what he can do. He won A10 Rookie of the Year. He's now first team preseason All A10. Will be on a better team, a deeper team with more talent around him that I think will only elevate his game at St. Joe's, especially playing alongside a guy like Jaden Glover Toscano. So he'll be my Big 5 Player of the Year. Big 5 newcomer is going to be a Caden Lewis. And we said this on our Big East preview with Tommy Godin. With the injury to Devin Askew, with the injury to Zion Stanford being a little short at the guard spot, Caden Lewis is going to be relied on right away to be a facilitator, to be the guy that's going to initiate offense and have the ball in his hands. And I think the talent that this guy has, you could tell why Mark Pope wanted him so bad at Kentucky, and just with all the guards he brought in, he decommitted from there. But he's going to take over this role, and he's not going to give it back. I think he's going to be the starting point guard for Villanova all season. So much talent with this guy, soft touch in the paint, good passer, good feel. And as Tommy Godin said, just wise beyond his years. Sure, he's a freshman, but surely doesn't play like that at that all-important point guard spot. And if you just look at the rest of the league, look at St. Joe's. Maybe there's some redshirt freshmen in a Kafik Myers and a Steven Solano, but they're only bringing in 2 true freshmen in Owen Verne and Austin Williford, who have to play behind a bunch of returners and transfers. You look at Drexel, really no freshmen to speak of for the most part. It's a bunch of guys who are returning and 4 transfers that they brought in. You look at Temple, they have 2 freshmen and a whole slew of transfers and 2 returners who were starters last year. And Villanova will bring in freshmen, as I talked about, and that's why Caden Lewis is my pick. But, I mean, even LaSalle, they just brought in a ton of transfers. There's only 2 true freshmen to speak of, being Ashton Walker, who came over with this staff, and then Nas Hart, who they recruited. So that you're just not seeing the freshman numbers like you used to see, hence why I think Caden Lewis is my newcomer, freshman of the year, whatever you like to call it. And then my X factor is going to be TJ Power. And sure, he comes in with the pedigree. Maybe it seems like a slam dunk and easy one to pick. But if Penn is going to hit their ceiling, don't forget that this is a guy that Fran McCaffrey was after so hard at Iowa. And then when TJ Power transferred from Duke, Fran McCaffrey was after him hard again. He finally gets him at his 3rd stop. TJ Power played behind some NBA players at Duke and Kyle Filipowski and Derek Lively, then goes to Virginia, where obviously that situation with Tony Bennett falls apart right before the year. It was just kind of a lost season that nobody had signed up for. He's at a spot where he's wanted. They're going to build things around him. His ability to shoot, his ability to create as a forward, him and Ethan Roberts can be a lethal duo in this league. And if Penn is going to be that team that makes Ivy Madness, is in the top 4, outperforms expectations, it's going to be because TJ Power was one of the best players in the Ivy League. He is perfectly set up. This is the perfect situation for him. Move down a level. You still have the same coach who was at the power level, who wanted you and who wants to feature you in a league where his size, his shooting ability, his offensive ability, he should be one of the better players in this league right away. And I think because of that, Penn will be closer to Aaron's expectations than they will the rest of the league or the rest of the media, whoever, who has them at 8.
Cope, I am going to get 2 out of the way right now. I'm going to go with Kevin Willard for Coach of the Year. And, a lot of what you said is true, and it is my reasoning for it, whereas that if they are the one to break the streak and make the NCAA tournament, how do you not pick him? I think that's pretty simple there. And for all the reasons that we went over, I don't think I have to expand on that, excuse me, so much more. I'm also going to agree with both of you, just to get this out of the way now, too. On Newcomer of the Year, it's going to be Caden Lewis. Tommy Godin was glowing about him. Everything that I've read and we've talked about has been the same, where this kid seemingly has the makings of being a stud. And you talk about Kevin Willard's development and, vision for the program in the first few years and keeping guys there and whatnot. Cope, you mentioned it the other day when we had Tommy on. He might not be there next year. He might be playing in the NBA next year. He might be on someone's bench or in the G League or even contributing minutes to an NBA team next year. This kid's good. This kid's really, really good. And there are other intriguing peaches that, you could think of. One that I will mention coming up here soon. But I think this is – I don't want to try to overthink too much when it comes to stuff like this. This is a pretty, I don't want to say obvious pick, but he is probably the favorite for this if there was a market for it or whatever, for a reason. This kid's good. Here's where I'm going to differ from the both of you. My player of the year, Aaron, you mentioned him briefly earlier, but I don't think anyone probably will be picking this going into this year. I'm going to go with Ethan Roberts from Penn as my Big 5 player of the year. Was a stud last year on a bad team, averaging about 17 points a game. Now he has a real second option in TJ Power. You got a new system with Fran McCaffrey that'll play even more toward his style than Steve Donahue did. Hopefully, as we talked about, Cope, some positive shooting regression, because they were really, really not good shooting the three-point shot last year. And I think retaining some of the same guys, hopefully that will go back to the way it was 2 years ago. And I know Sam Brown's not in the mix anymore. I know Clark Slackard from a couple years ago isn't in the mix anymore. But Ethan Roberts is a stud. This kid could put the ball in the net, as we saw last year. And if Penn takes the improvements that it seems like the three of us think they will, he's going to be reason number one for that. TJ Power will be reason number two. But I think having someone else to take a little bit of the pressure off him will allow him to get more open looks and more opportunities to score the basketball. So I think he's going to be my Big 5 player of the year. I think he's going to be a stud in the Ivy League this year. And my my X factor, I'm going to go with Jaden Glover-Toscano from St. Joe's. Another, as Cope, you were talking about with TJ Power, someone who was highly touted, made a couple stops, and now hopefully will be finding his way with Penn. Jaden Glover-Toscano last year going to St. John's, playing behind an extremely experienced team, a team that won the Big East, was a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament, playing under Rick Pitino, was a fairly big prospect, just didn't play a whole lot, but talented for a reason. If Rick Pitino's recruiting you to St. John's, it's for a reason. So him taking a step down now, playing in the same backcourt with Deuce Jones, who was the A10 Rookie of the Year last year, and your guys' pick for Big Five Player of the Year. He's phenomenal. But having, that sidekick and being able to have, another scoring option in that backcourt, I think that's going to be huge. And I think the both of them are going to play off each other very well. But I think for Glover-Toscano in particular, I think his presence is going to be massive for St. Joe's this year, and that's going to make or break whether or not they finish in the top half of the A10 or the bottom half of the A10. So for my X factor, I'm going to go with Jaden Glover-Toscano. All right, guys, one final thought from each of you before we wrap up this Big Five preview, before we wrap up preview season, and we can say play ball.
Yeah, you guys are getting me pumped up. That would be my final thought. I can't wait for the games. My brain is a little sidetracked at the moment because I'm working on the Sixers book. So I'm going to be sort of dipping my toes in two different worlds. But this podcast is getting me even more excited. College basketball is just awesome. I know there are a lot of warts. I know the NIL and transfer portal has brought change. And some of it, frankly, is good. Some of it not as good, just trying to know the players each year. But I love college basketball. I love the Big Five, and I just can't wait for the season. So thanks for having me on, and thanks for getting me hyped up for the season.
Oh, anytime. You're basically an honorary member of this here program. So we appreciate having you on every time. We appreciate you making the time for us. Excited to see you in person for the first. We saw each other at the sports writers meeting about a month ago. But yeah, good. It'll be nice to see you in person because it's been a while. First time, I think it twice really because we've done this year pod and then we saw each other. So we've only seen each other twice since the end of last season. So that would be nice to get back in the gym and see you. But yeah, just excited for games. My favorite time of the year. One of my favorite things in the world is college hoops, the Big Five, and ultimately the run up and lead up until March Madness. And I'm just going to end on my schedule for the next week. Monday, I will be at Hagan Arena for Steve Donahue's first game. I'll be at Lafayette at St. Joe's Monday. Wednesday, I'll be at Glazier Arena for Darius Nichols' first game for Coppin State versus LaSalle on Wednesday. I don't usually do this. Friday, I will be at the Palestra. You don't have to twist my arm to go there. I will be at the Palestra for Rowan against Penn, given that it's Fran McCaffrey's first game. And although I can't make Kevin Willard's home opener at the Finn, that Saturday, I will be at Hagan Arena as Zach Spiker's Drexel Dragons go into Hagan Arena, play Steve his old associate, might I add, and very good friend, Steve Donahue, in Big Five pod play. I was at 46 games last year. I'm hoping to get up over 50 this year. Barring something unforeseen, I'll get 4 in the first week.
Wow. Yeah, for me, I think my first game will be that Friday, November 8th game, or Saturday, November 8th game, excuse me, with Penn and St. Joe's. TBD still, but I believe that'll be my first game. But nonetheless, excited to get back at it. And also for my final thought, I just want to take the time to thank everyone we've had on during conference preview week. Riley Frayne, Ian Wennick, Tommy Godin, Luke Taylor, Tyler Cronin, and of course, the man sitting here with me, Aaron Bracy. Thank you guys so much for helping us in this crazy schedule right before the season starts, previewing everything and giving hopefully what our Big Five fans want. And that's a breakdown of every team, every conference, and Big Five play itself. We, Cope and I, we pride ourselves on being the main source of Big Five info outside of you, of course, too, Aaron. Big Five coverage in this city, and we pride ourselves on being the best on that. So, it was a lot to do, and this past week we've had a couple double nights and grinded a lot to get this done and our own notes and things as well, but well worth it if you guys are taking this information and hopefully getting excited for this season. So thank you guys for tuning in as well, and of course thank you to my co-host as well, Jake Copestick, for scheduling these things and copying them with me as well and mapping out everything as you do. And we have a whole season ahead of us, so we can do more thanks after the season, of course. But just for this portion and preview week, it's obviously a big undertaking, so thank you as well. And that's all I got to say about that. Aaron, once again, thank you so much for coming on. I will take 30 seconds or so and plug your research in your book, because you did it a bunch with the soaring season, which we see behind you, and you got another one coming out. I know you mentioned it briefly, so take 30 seconds or so and plug your book too, so we don't forget about that.
Yeah, thank you. Similar to the St. Joe's story, in 2000, 2001, Allen Iverson and the 76ers captured the city. You guys were probably either not around or in diapers, but
yeah.
It was an incredible time. And when I wrote the St. Joe's book, I was enjoying it so much that while I was writing, I made a list of other ideas I had. I have about 6 ideas. That was on my list. I started a few different projects, started and stopped, and I settled on the 2000-2001 76ers. So I've been working on it since June. I am still in the research phase. I've done 17 interviews, including a brief one with Allen Iverson, who I hope to talk to more. But it's been fantastic. Similar to St. Joe's, like, I feel like people who are around then are going to really enjoy kind of reliving the memories. And guys like yourself and girls who kind of heard about that team, knew a little bit about Allen Iverson, but weren't there, I think are going to get to experience it for the first time. So it's been a lot of fun, but it's been a lot of work, but a lot of fun. And thank you for the opportunity. It's scheduled to be published in April 2027. My deadline to submit it is August 31st, 2026, next August. So I'll be working on it furiously. I work on it every day, and I'll be working on it every day from now until the end of August. Cope, I don't think I'm going to be able to get to 50 games this year. So I'm going to get to as many as I can, but I'll be relying on your expertise, Kyle, your expertise and your eyes to kind of fill me in. So when we're on spaces, you might have to carry me a little. But just want to just thank you guys again for having me, and just really commend the work that you guys do. It's just fantastic. And the city and the city's basketball fans are really lucky to have you guys. So thank you, and keep up the great work.
Thank you, Aaron. That's very nice of you. And, of course, we love doing spaces, and we're always there to pick you up too, as we do, all 3 of us with each other. So, yeah, definitely great. But listen, thank you all, of course, for tuning in for preview week and everything that we do, everything that Aaron does. We very much appreciate it, of course. And you know where to find Aaron at Aaron_Bracy, or just Aaron Bracy_Bracy on Twitter, Instagram, big5hoops.com, of course, Bracy Sports Media. And then for us, Instagram and Twitter at Big5Pod, our YouTube, which if you're seeing this now. If you're just listening to it, then you must have found our audio only versions wherever you get your podcasts. And with that, we can say play ball. We'll see you next time.